Have you ever noticed that the quietest person in the room often feels the most powerful? Not the loudest. Not the funniest. Not the one fighting for attention. The one who speaks less, but when they do, everyone listens. Silence makes people uncomfortable. When you don't immediately react, defend yourself, or explain your position, something interesting happens. The other person starts thinking. They start guessing. They start filling in the gaps. And in those gaps, they often reveal more about themselves than you ever could with words. Most people talk to gain control. But control doesn't come from noise. It comes from restraint. The ability to pause. To hold eye contact. To let tension sit without rushing to fix it. Today, you're going to understand why silence isn't weakness. It isn't passivity. And it definitely isn't fear. It's psychological leverage. And once you learn how to use it, the dynamic in every room you enter will quietly shift in your favor. The first reason silence is powerful is simple: it creates uncertainty. And uncertainty is psychologically uncomfortable. When you respond immediately to everything, every joke, every criticism, every challenge, you make people feel oriented. They know where you stand. They know how to read you. You become predictable. But silence interrupts that predictability. When someone challenges you and you don't react right away, their brain goes to work. Did that bother them? Are they confident? Are they judging me? Did I say too much? The lack of instant feedback forces the other person to fill in the blanks. And here's the key: people usually fill silence with their own insecurities. Humans are wired to seek certainty. In conversations, we constantly scan for emotional signals, nods, facial expressions, tone shifts. When those signals disappear, tension rises. Not dramatic tension. Psychological tension. That tension shifts the dynamic. The person who talks first often gives away more information. The person who rushes to explain loses leverage. But the person who pauses, who holds eye contact and stays composed, subtly positions themselves as stable. Silence suggests self-control. It signals that you are not reactive. And in social hierarchies, the less reactive person often appears more powerful. This doesn't mean being cold or distant. It means being intentional. It means not rushing to defend, justify, or impress. When you become comfortable with silence, other people become slightly uncomfortable around you, not in fear, but in awareness. They think more carefully. They speak more deliberately. And without saying much at all, you gain psychological ground. Because in a world addicted to noise, the person who controls silence controls the frame. Most people think silence hides weakness. In reality, it reveals truth. When you stop talking, something unusual happens. The spotlight shifts. The pressure moves. The other person suddenly feels the need to fill the space. And in doing so, they begin to expose parts of themselves they never planned to show. Silence removes the distraction of your words. There's no argument to fight. No explanation to attack. No emotional reaction to feed on. All that remains is them, and the uncomfortable space between you. And humans hate uncomfortable space. So they rush to fill it. They talk more than necessary. They justify themselves without being accused. They reveal insecurities they were trying to hide. They over-explain. They contradict themselves. They show cracks. Not because you forced them, but because you didn't. Silence acts like a mirror. When you don't interrupt, defend, or react, people begin hearing their own words more clearly. And often they don't like what they hear. The more they speak, the more visible their intentions become. Confident people remain composed in silence. Insecure people panic inside it. That's the difference. When you master silence, you stop chasing information. You let it come to you. You let others show you who they are, without interrogation, without confrontation, without pressure. And the most powerful part, they rarely realize they exposed themselves. You didn't manipulate the situation. You didn't argue. You didn't push. You simply stayed quiet. And in that quiet, truth surfaced on its own. Every conversation has leverage. Not obvious power. Not volume. Not dominance. Leverage is information, emotional control, timing. And the fastest way to lose leverage is to talk too much. The more you explain, the more you reveal your position, your fears, your intentions, your urgency. Over-explaining doesn't make you stronger, it makes you easier to negotiate against. When people know exactly where you stand and how badly you want something, your flexibility disappears. Silence protects that edge. When you don't immediately respond, you prevent others from measuring you too quickly. When you don't justify every decision, you protect your internal reasoning. When you don't react emotionally, you deny them access to your pressure points. Think about negotiations. The person who speaks first often reveals their limits. The person who rushes to clarify often exposes insecurity. But the one who pauses, who waits, controls the tempo. Silence creates space. And space protects power. It forces the other person to show more before you show anything. It keeps your standards unannounced but clearly felt. It makes your words heavier because they are rare. Leverage isn't about manipulation. It's about restraint. When you master silence, you stop giving away your position for free. You stop explaining your worth. You stop negotiating against yourself. And suddenly, the dynamic changes. Because the person who reveals less often controls more. Silence is powerful. But power without awareness becomes a weakness. Not every moment rewards quiet restraint. Sometimes silence protects leverage. Other times, it creates misunderstanding. The difference is intention. When silence comes from confidence, it feels steady. When silence comes from fear, it feels tense. People can sense that tension. If you stay quiet because you're afraid to speak, afraid of conflict, or afraid of being judged, your silence doesn't project strength, it projects uncertainty. And uncertainty invites assumptions. In relationships, silence can be misread as indifference. In leadership, it can feel like avoidance. In conflict, it can look like guilt. When you refuse to clarify anything at all, others will fill the gap with their own narratives. And those narratives are rarely generous. Silence also backfires when timing is wrong. There are moments when speaking is necessary. Boundaries must be stated. Expectations must be clarified. Accountability must be acknowledged. Strategic silence is controlled. Emotional withdrawal is not. The key question is simple. Are you choosing silence, or hiding behind it? One builds presence. The other erodes it. Mastery isn't about staying quiet in every situation. It's about knowing when quiet creates power, and when words create alignment. Silence should never replace communication. It should sharpen it. Because the strongest voice is the one that knows when not to speak, and when it must. Silence is not the absence of power. It is controlled power. Most people speak to feel safe. They explain, defend, react, and fill every gap with words. But strategic silence works differently. It creates space, and space shifts dynamics. First, use silence to observe. When you stop talking, you start seeing. You notice tone changes, body language shifts, hesitation in someone's voice. Information flows toward the quiet person. The one who speaks less often understands more. Second, use silence after you make a statement. Say what needs to be said, clearly and calmly, then stop. Don't over-explain. Don't justify. Don't rush to soften your position. Let the other person sit with it. The discomfort will push them to respond, reveal, or negotiate. Third, use silence in moments of provocation. When someone tries to trigger you emotionally, they expect a reaction. Reaction gives them control. Silence removes their reward. A calm pause communicates stability. It shows you are not easily moved. Fourth, use silence to reset tension. In heated conversations, words pile on top of words. A deliberate pause lowers emotional intensity. It forces both sides to think rather than react. But remember, strategic silence is intentional. It is not withdrawal. It is not passive aggression. It is not avoidance. When clarity is required, speak. When boundaries must be set, state them. The goal is balance. Speak with purpose. Pause with purpose. Because the person who controls their words controls the atmosphere. And the one who controls the atmosphere often controls the outcome. Here's the twist. Silence doesn't just change other people. It changes you. The moment you stop reacting, you stop being predictable. And when you're no longer predictable, you're no longer easy to control. Most manipulation works because it relies on emotional reflex. Trigger. Reaction. Repeat. Silence breaks that pattern. But the real shift isn't outside, it's internal. In the pause, you meet your impulses. Your need to defend. Your urge to prove. Your fear of being misunderstood. And when you can sit with that without speaking, you're not just controlling the conversation. You're mastering yourself. And that is the rarest power of all.